Call this meeting of the Lincoln Way 210 Board of Education to order. Please rise for the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Mr. Kirking.
Here.
Mr. Kozel.
Here.
Mr. Kostick.
Here.
Mr. Lucetti.
Here.
Mr. Lulo.
Here.
Mrs. Molinari. Here. Thank you all for coming out for tonight's meeting. We have a few public comments. Cheryl Weiss, you may step up to the podium, please. And I'll remind you that you have 5 minutes to address.
The dictionary defines the word oversight as
Mr. John Parrish.
Good evening. As you are aware, my name is John Parrish. Here tonight, pleased and anxious to share more straight talk with the board. My 5-minute or less contribution will be delivered as a bullet point critique of recent events the board finds themselves engaged in related to our financial emergency. First topic. Happy to see members Chris Lucetti and Joe Kirking demonstrating a sense of urgency and to show me challenge mentality on the dire financial dilemma we all are trying to resolve. I implore every member to follow their lead. Next topic. Tonight's anticipated action on the issuance of $20 million of tax anticipation warrants and the sale of same to Old Second National Bank. For transparency's sake, I would expect during the discussion prior to the vote that Scott and board members would describe to the community why this major financial transaction is necessary and why it is the best deal in the current financial marketplace. I would also expect Scott and board members would assure the community there are no conflicts of interest, including but not limited to insider benefits. Next topic. I personally was surprised and dismayed to see local teacher union leadership, when they finally step up publicly, admonish the board for egregious administrative shortcomings and strongly recommend the hiring of an administrative position which would likely become part of the collective bargaining unit and add additional costs to the district. It is my opinion the district would be better served by union leadership which would offer reasonable financial concessions to help the district free itself from the shackles of this dire financial situation. However, Scott, don't get me wrong. Whoever has the responsibility in the emerging lean district administrative structure for meeting regulatory deadlines has to be held accountable for missing them, including you. Just calling it a regrettable oversight doesn't cut it. Remember, Scott, Harry Truman was right about where the buck eventually stops. Next topic. Happy to see the board supported the strategic planning initiative to be facilitated at no cost by Dr. Madonia. I too have had extensive experience in the leadership, facilitation, and implementation of strategic plans. My experience has been in the private sector, manufacturing arena, and in a couple instances for companies who were challenged with serious financial difficulties while going through the strategic planning process. I believe I can add considerable value to the strategic planning process and, if desired, the implementation, naturally, at no cost. Next topic. It is my opinion the board should take steps tonight to get out of the child care business by notifying the current provider and district employed customers of its intent and the date the services would terminate. It is time to move on to the many other pressing issues which need to be addressed by the board. Further, I would allow the emerging lean organization to cover the duties of the retiring foundation director as discussion goes forward with foundation leadership. Finally, Christopher Kozel. I recommend to you your warning to the audience prior to the financial committee meeting cease and desist. It is unnecessary. and borders on being abusive, threatening, and intimidating. Trust our security officers know their jobs and will take the appropriate steps if warranted. That's all for this evening. Thank you.
Mr. Parrish, just to be clear, my comments last meeting were to make sure that everyone's voices are heard, no matter whether they're for or against this board. Thank you.
Melanie Troyer.
I don't have it all written out. I am Melanie Troyer, and my comments are just in regards to the same article that was already mentioned by Cheryl, with the quote of being under a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. And I've been coming to the board meetings, sorry to say, only for the last year and a half, and I sit through and I watch, and I walk away every time feeling like there's such arrogance here, and it's getting me. I'm getting real tired, and I know that you guys are under a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny, and you're getting tired, but I'm asking you to put yourself in our shoes. I didn't choose to be a superintendent or a board member for a reason. I don't have the time. You get paid to do your job, and the rest of you volunteered to do this. You fought to get these positions. I didn't. All the things that have gone on that have come to light, and I'm so, so grateful for the people who have done so much research and brought things to light that we were totally unaware of because we put our trust into the board. And it's getting old. It's getting real old. And I'm asking you to put yourself in our shoes. We trusted you. I thought that paying half of my real estate taxes to the school board would be sufficient, but it's not. So now I have to take time out of my schedule to make sure I be here to support the people who have done so much and found out so much information that I did not know. I've learned a whole lot, but one of the main things that I've learned is that there's a whole lot to be said for humility. My Bible says that God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble, and the reality is that people will do the same. I have yet to hear an apology. I have yet to hear accountability from people. It's just, as was said, oversights. I cannot believe that you haven't taken responsibility for the things. These were all under your watch. These were all, a lot can be said for humility, and that's what I'm asking for, and that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to action items. May I have a motion to approve the 2016 tax levy?
I'd like to make a resolution authorizing the issuance.
No, just a moment. Sorry, Mr. Lidlow.
Sorry,
That's okay.
I can present. Let me present a couple things first.
Okay.
If everyone's okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Just in your backup materials and sent at the end of last week was a synopsis of the 2016 tax levy. Certainly the timing of this is different than what it's been in the past. Typically, the levies are they need to be turned in by the end of December. We do have the opportunity to rework this, resubmit this. We can bring this back to the board again in October, November, December. However, we must have this approved to begin the borrowing that is necessary tomorrow to close the month of September with positive fund balances in all of our funds. We paid back $10 million plus some interest today. So as of today, all of our tax anticipation warrants from the previous year have been paid. The plan is this evening, approve the levy, discuss the resolution for tax anticipation warrants, borrow $7 million or sell $7 million in tax anticipation warrants tomorrow to get us through, we believe, 2 more months before we have to come back and take another bite of the apple, so to speak. So with the levy, you received in your packets the 2.9% increase. Now, this is not a balloon levy. Some districts, we've done this in the past, do a 5%, do a 6%, do a whatever to be sure that they capture everything. Well, we know the numbers. We anticipate the increase to be 2.16%. That's 0.7 CPI plus 1.4 in the new property. And as we've discussed recently, we'll be moving the levy to match our budget. So as you can see, O&M will see an increase in the levy, 12.3, and then transportation will be reduced. Everything else will stay at that 2.9%. Our historical EAV, as we know, in 5, 6, 7, very high. It's decreased over time. We've seen a little uptick in 14, 15, 16. The estimate we have from Will County is $52 million. They've been right on their estimates. This 2.9% new construction could come in at $80 million, and we would still be able to capture the tax on that new construction at 2.9. Keep in mind, asking the 2.9, we're not going to get that. We'll probably receive the 2.16. Something that is going to need to be addressed and discussed as we move forward, and it was part of your supporting materials, is our debt service schedule. As you can see, we see a spike in 2019, and that continues through 2031. That does not impact our operating funds. However, it will impact our taxpayers as those increases come into play. As we go through the course of this year and through next year, we will have to have some discussions on what options there are. Would the board like to extend debt? Where we'll go. And those discussions will take place this winter and into the spring. We have a couple of years, but certainly, that increase is looming, and I think bears discussion moving forward. Then the last is a tax rate comparison. These are 34, I believe, high school districts in northern Illinois, and we're the sixth from the bottom. You've got Hinsdale, Morris, 99, which is Downers Grove, Lockport, Bradley, Bourbonnais, then Lincoln Way. Our tax rates will increase over the next several years, but comparable to other districts, our rate, total tax rate, does remain low. I would ask for a motion to approve the levy as presented, knowing that if there are any questions or concerns, we can bring it back for more review in October, November, and even December. But we must have this in place as our tax anticipation warrant is borrowing against this particular levy.
I have a motion to approve the 2016 tax levy.
I'd like to make the resolution authorizing the issue.
Not yet.
Don't you?
Hurry.
I give up.
No, we just need a motion.
I need a motion for this, just a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Discussion.
I was happy to see the change from the preliminary one that came out, I believe, on September 9th. And we did add the $750,000, which we talked about at our last meeting, to operations and maintenance, and took that from transportation. And I see on here, so you can amend this. That's what you're talking about when you said we have additional time.
We could bring this back, absolutely.
And why normally was it done in December and not now? I mean, what information do you learn from now until December? Is it mostly just the
It's a
construction?
Yeah. It's new construction, you get the solid number, and it's also a timing thing.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so I mean, I think from the standpoint of every year you showed here, it's 99%. I think I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Construction and CPI would be the only other thing that
Yes.
would be a variable that would hit.
Well, CPI is known.
Well, with the fourth quarter CPI would, every month it would come out between now and December.
It's 2006. It's the
Right,
past
but I know,
year's
but you're
CPI.
forecasting in, trying to come up with the numbers. It doesn't, you're right, to the extent that my question is, what if we don't pass this? What happens?
We can't do the resolution for the TAWs.
And what happens if there's no resolution for the TAWs?
Then we would be into phantom borrowing, which we have the fund balances, but that's a practice we certainly want to stay away from. And we have $5 million in our capital projects that would be able to carry us through, but that's not the appropriate way to do it. So we would need to put the money that we would borrow tomorrow into the ed fund. It would make us whole for the month of September, and then would allow us to move through the next month and a half, maybe 2 months, before we would need to go back for another draw.
And as discussed previously, the reason for that we're looking at these costs the way we are is to make sure we're minimizing the impact of the interest, correct? By taking at different times.
Taking the draws.
So are we talking about the tax anticipation warrants now?
We're still on the levy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
We're still on the levy.
Sorry, I jumped.
Sorry.
Anything further?
This is a little overlapping, but the 85% limit then on the tax anticipation warrants is strictly on the amount you levy for the educational fund? Is that
Correct. 85% of the ed fund, correct.
So the max would be 39 million or less, depending on how much is actually left.
Yes, and we could do TAWs for O&M, but right now we're trying to keep it isolated to one borrowing, yeah.
Anything further?
Thank you.
A motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lucetti?
Aye.
Mr. Kirking?
Aye.
Mr. Kozel?
Aye.
Mr. Costick?
Aye.
Mr. Lulo?
Aye.
Mrs. Molinaro?
Aye. Moving on to the resolution. A view of the financial conditions of the district, the next item for discussion would be the proposed issuance of the district's educational purposes tax anticipation warrants, and the Board of Education would consider the adoption of a resolution authorizing the issuance and the sale of said warrants. The resolution sets forth the parameters for the issuance of said warrants and sale thereof designated officials of the district. Total aggregate not to exceed $20 million, maturity not later than October 30th, 2017. The warrants shall bear interest at a rate per annum equal to the prime rate in effect from time to time minus 1.65%, but not less than 1.85% and not more than 3%, and shall be issued from time to time as set forth in each warrant notification. Mr. Lulo.
I'd like to make a resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed 20 million tax anticipation warrants in anticipation of collecting of taxes levied for the year 2016 by the Board of Education of Community High School District Number 210, Will and Cook Counties, Illinois, for educational purposes, the sale of said warrants to Wells Second Bank, the deposit of said taxes directly into a designated escrow account, and the execution and delivery of the tax escrow agreement in connection therewith.
Motion, may we have a second, please?
Second.
Discussion.
Can you describe the TAW process?
Well, this one's a little different than the ones we've gone through in the past. This was much more difficult to secure funding. We believe we will need somewhere 25 to 28 million before the end of the year. We've been able to secure 20. We've talked with a number of organizations in an effort to get the best rate we can. I'm not going to discuss all the different organizations at this time, as we're going to be in a position where we're going to need to go back at some time and try to borrow more money. What's done differently this time is the automatic escrow. So our taxes will move, once the taxes hit Will County, the percentage of our borrowing will go right into an escrow account into the bank. And that's something that is done to secure the loan, as you know, our cash flow situation is very delicate. As we paid it back and turn around and borrow the next day, it's a limited risk in that we know we're going to collect taxes. But at the same time, we're in a vulnerable situation as we carried over borrowing into the fiscal year, and we don't want to get in a situation where we are into next year's tax anticipation warrants. To do so, we would have to do a levy for the following year now, and we want to avoid that. So as we move through this process, this has been different than it's been in the past, in that the money will automatically leave. That will also, though, help control the interest rates. As soon as the distributions hit in the spring, I believe it's 28 some percent, we'll go directly to hold second of the ed receipts of our our taxes.
And then that money will then immediately pay down the tax
Correct.
anticipation warrant.
Immediately pay down, and each draw, then they will send us an invoice essentially for the interest from that portion, and then it'll be up to our timing of whether or not we're able to pay the interest. But it would be our plan to pay the loan back plus the interest ongoing as we work our way through.
Are we planning to draw down the full 20 million?
No, we will draw 7 tomorrow, Chris. At some point, we will need all 20, but we will begin with 7. We've worked with our attorney on this structure, and that limits the interest rate, so we're only borrowing when we need. So right now, we anticipate 776 based upon the timing, and we'll know more. We're still waiting on categoricals from the last fiscal year, so we believe we'll receive that by the next draw, and that can push it out just a little further. But we'll start with 7 million tomorrow.
And I mean, I think another thing that has to be noted is, even though we're somewhat reducing the risk of the bank by having an escrow account, they're still charging a higher rate than they were last year.
Correct. We were 1.75 last year.
And that's and it's also a floating rate because it's prime minus. So if interest rates do go up, our interest costs are going to be higher on this. I do have one, what is the plan? Because we're going to need more than that 20 million. When do we start closing that gap and securing that
additional 7-8? Well, when we get to the end of the first quarter, which happens tomorrow, there'll be some more opportunities with discussion with Old Second. As long as we are making progress through our cash flows through this year, I believe we'll have the opportunity to receive funding. If we don't, and we'll know here, we've got to know October, November, because it'll be February, March when we need that final draw. We'll have to work through the whole chain of events that we went through to get to this point, and hopefully there's a lender out there that will give us that last 5 to 7 million. I'm concerned about the interest rate. But we will know, we'll have to start working through this October, November. If we don't, then the other option is to go to the state. And I've already been in discussion with the state. Deb Vespa from ISB was aware of our situation as we were having a hard time securing funding here in the last month. So they're aware of the situation, and other districts have had to go that route in the past. We wouldn't like to, but it's certainly a possibility.
I think it would be helpful if you disclose, not organizations, but types, because I think we...
School districts, other municipalities, banks. We probably 10 different organizations we reached out to, and it's a tough timing issue. It's a tough amount, and I'm appreciative that Old Second stuck with us and is helping us out here, and I believe they'll come through as we move through the course. We have a long-standing relationship with Old Second Bank. They do our payroll, and I think we can work our way through this.
What other business do we have with them?
They receive the float. Right now we don't have money deposited. Our money is in the state funds, so from the payroll side, they receive that float, and that's about it at this time. We don't have bank deposits, very few CDs.
Did we borrow all our TAWs last year from one bank, or do we have multiple?
No, all 30 million from Old Second.
Okay, so that begs the question, if the way you just described it, sounds pretty foolproof. The taxpayers pay the county puts it in the bank takes the money. So there's...
The reason is we've never carried it over in the fiscal year, Joe. And that was, even though they were due October 30, we were always whole by June 30th. And this was the first year we carried over.
So that made them take pause to
I believe
evaluate, watch how this first draws go.
I believe so. And also, they're operating a business, they read the newspapers, and they answer to a board as well.
Which I can totally appreciate. But I still, am a little bit bewildered on the fact as to where their risk lie.
No,
Because
it's-
I can see if the deposits were coming here, or
Correct.
to the district, which is actually in their bank, and then it had to be authorized, or somebody had to write the check to make it, but the agreement that you have in front of us, which includes that escrow agreement.
Money goes there, correct.
We have no control over that, so we're committing to the payment regardless.
I'm assuming they keep these on their balance sheet, they're not marketing these to other clients. I mean, that they're allowed to, but I'm assuming that they're.
I assume, Chris, but I don't know.
Were last year's prime minus as well?
No, last year's were set at 1.75%.
Anything further?
This was the best deal we could find.
At this time, and the most we could get at this time. We're going to have to go back and finish this.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Lulo.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkland.
Aye.
Mr. Kosel.
Aye.
Mr. Costick.
Aye.
Mr. Lucetti.
Aye.
Mrs. Molinaro.
Aye. Moving on to discussion item of on-site childcare.
Discussion of on-site childcare. I provided some information. I did issue a questionnaire to the staff. And, 93%, 93.7% of the respondents said they would support on-site childcare services. I guess 22 would utilize the service next year, which would equate to about 167 children. I also provided for you notes from Mr. Pagliaro's meeting with Triple R Childcare, Mary Sears, and KinderCare Learning Center. Their questions and discussion of all three companies was very similar in terms of, economies of scale. It looks like they would like to have one larger space to run the entire operation. We simply don't have that. The only way we would be able to do something if we chose to would be in our current type of situation. We don't have a space that would facilitate 150 children. If we only give them one spot, then we're in a lottery, and I don't think that's a good situation. So I looked for direction from the board. I think if we were going to move forward with an RFQ or an RFP, the first thing that would have to take place is on a Saturday or Sunday, show every interested party the facilities to see if that's even an option. I think that's step one, is that they see the facilities, get the square footage, determine how many children they would be able to care for in each facility. Once that's finished, if there is interest in operating child care services on site, the board would have to help to determine the parameters of that setting. I don't believe we want to get into the furniture business. Some of the other school districts fronted the furniture, the cribs, the chairs. I don't think that's a good practice. So from that standpoint, anything that's brought in would have to be done by the company, and then there would have to be a dollar amount that the district would look to recover on a remittance or a payment. But I'm open. But I think that if the board were even to consider, the first step is to see if there's any viable businesses that would want to operate in 3 separate school buildings. Some pluses and minuses real quick. The disadvantage, obviously, rooms at Central and East could be utilized for classrooms, and we can move those back into classrooms. Advantages, as we've heard from teachers, they're able to spend extra time at school. They're able to be a sponsor, be a coach, but those are kind of both sides of the coin a little bit, but I can answer any questions or thoughts that you may have.
How many classrooms do we currently tie up or utilize for the daycare?
It would be 2 at East, and it equates to about 2.5. Rich, is that right, about 2.5 at Central? 3? Okay, 3 classrooms at Central in the art hallway.
And if we go out for this, we're going to entertain one company. We wouldn't have 3 companies, one at each.
We would want to do that.
Good, okay.
Is there, Is there a way we can do this without a cost to the taxpayers or without a cost to still provide this benefit for our teachers? Because we're seeing 93% of the teachers are in support of it. You know, we've got a number of good teachers who utilize it at this time. Can we do that without costing?
Well,
Can we build the RFP or RFQ that way?
we can. I mean, the $60,000 we're receiving this year technically covers the cost of the facilities. There's always going to be that time. You know, as long as it's being held in our buildings, there's going to be some involvement by our staff. You know, and that's particularly if a new company were to come in. I think there would be more time as you're building that relationship and getting to understand how it's going to work. So there will always be hidden costs, but in terms of utilities, facility usage, we can cover our costs with that $60,000 or more, depending upon what the board would want to do.
The cost that we actually can quantify at this time, it's about $10,000 a year per building.
Yeah.
It's about $30,000.
Scott, has this been legally vetted? I know there's been a lot of discussion. Is this a landlord-tenant? Is this a vendor? Where do we stand on that right now?
It has. Our attorneys are comfortable with the situation.
What is that situation?
Situation is, it's just like vending machines. You know, they are, you know, we don't give them the keys and they lock us out. It's not a long-term lease. It's a service provider agreement.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that's where we get into trouble if we try and charge and make this a profit center.
Well,
because then it becomes a taxing and
you can
we
always-
have all other implications there.
You can always make money. The difference is, Chris, is if, as long as we do not give up the property, you know, like if we give them the keys and we can't go in there, then it becomes a straight rental, and that's what we have to stay away from. So, you know, our attorneys have advised us that as long as charges are reasonable and it is not an exclusive, we are not giving them exclusive rights to that building. For instance, we can move them whenever we want. That room is not exclusively theirs, that we're okay legally.
You mentioned east and central with classroom space. What's the difference with west?
West, it was built with that particular use in mind, Chris. So we could turn it into offices, but in terms of a classroom space, there's smaller rooms that were set up for child care services. It's back a different hallway.
Do we need these rooms at central and east?
Don't think we need them, but certainly at East, 2 additional classrooms, that would be beneficial, no question, you could use the space.
Is this something maybe that we want to work on with the Building and Finance Committee to try and develop that RFQ, RFP?
That would be up to the board. I mean, the board gives direction to that committee, and if that's something that we want to discuss, I believe we have a meeting on the 8th, is it? But I know we have one coming up. That's up to the board.
I think if we're going to do it, if there's that 6-month lead time and whatnot, we need to be moving on it sooner than later. So if we're going to do this, it has to be on a tight timeline.
Yeah, I think if we're going to do it, if that's where the consensus of the board is, that, you know, if we're going to do this, and I think personally that it needs to be at no cost to the taxpayers. I don't think we can get exact, but do the best we can to develop that RFP, RFQ to do that. What's your thoughts on that?
If we were going to do it, the first step, and then I can report back in October, obviously, the first step is to contact any operator in the area and give them a date and time to come see the facilities and see if there's even any interest.
If they're not interested, it's not going to
That's not more.
Then there's no reason to keep going. I think that's the first step, and we can do that. You know, we can do that next week. Next week, I can contact all the companies and see who's willing to come in for a tour, and then go from there.
I think that is the plan. Let's do that and move forward, or not move forward, whatever needs to be done. Anything further? Motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming out.
christened the